Hi, I'm Frank Carlyle and I'm a local historian, and as you can see, the famous Liverpool waterfront is covered in mist. Over the centuries, many people have written about Liverpool and not all of them have got it right. So come with me through my city to dispel some of these myths. Here we are in Castle Street, and as you can see, the mist has lifted. But I want to show you this before we get to the castle, and it's the Sanctuary Stone. But where is the Sanctuary Stone? In fact, it's in the middle of the roads of Castle Street, and before I jump on it, I've got to be very careful. There's a myth surrounding this Sanctuary Stone, but I'm not going to stay here and tell you, it's too dangerous, so come with me. During medieval times, when all the business was being conducted by the merchants and exchange flags, now people depended on their ships coming in, and all their money was tied up with these ships, but they used to get credit. Then the creditors, actually, if they'd seen someone who owed them money, they would run and chase them until they got to the Sanctuary Stone. They jumped on the Sanctuary Stone and claimed sanctuary for 2 solid weeks. There's another myth that surrounds the Sanctuary Stone, and it involves slaves. And they were supposed to have ran up off the ships, up Bank Street, which is Water Street now, down to Castle Street, jump on the Sanctuary Stone and claimed freemen. Unfortunately, that was a myth, because the actual Sanctuary Stone legislation ended in 1696, 4 years before Liverpool was involved in the slave trade. When I mention freemen, that's what they would have been, free men. We're at the back of the town hall and exchange flags. But could you believe that this used to be an orchard? But I'll tell you about that later. Staying with the slave theme, just have a look at this wonderful, beautiful memorial. The memorial to Admiral Horatio Nelson. The memorial was designed by James Wyatt and sculpted by Westmacott and was erected in 1813. And as you can see, there are 4 figures in chains. For years, many people who have walked through exchange flags have taken these 4 figures as slaves. In fact, they are 4 French prisoners of war actually taken by Nelson to represent his famous 4 victories in battle with the French. They are the Battle of St. Vincent, the Battle of the Nile, the Battle of Copenhagen, and the battle, his final battle, of Trafalgar. There is only one man who said England expects every man to do his duty, and that was Admiral Lord Horatio Nelson, and it's actually written on the monument itself. There's another myth dispelled on Liverpool Unravelled. We're on our way to the castle now, but just before we get there, have a look at all this. Look at this. It's been battered, absolutely battered, but it was battered by the Luftwaffe. And people often ask me, why haven't they repaired it? Well, it's a living memorial to the May Blitz. Here we are on the site of the castle. Obviously it's gone, went centuries ago, 1723 to be precise. But the plaque tells you it's all about the site. Is this the castle wall? No, it's FM Simpson's Victoria Monument, and it's been here since 1906. But when you look around the actual site, you will find clues about the castle, like the Castle Moat House and Lower Castle Street. Queen Victoria doesn't look very happy, does she? She's been here for over 100 years. I wonder if she's been waiting for a bus in that time. But beneath her feet lies fantastic history. Williamson Ferris built the castle in 1235, but in 1644 Prince Rupert laid siege to the Liverpool castle from Everton. There were 4 major families in Liverpool: the Moors, the Norrises, the Stanleys, the Molyneux. And it was the Moors who were the Roundheads. They had taken the parliamentary course. But when he seen a 3-pronged attack by Prince Rupert from Everton and Old Hall Street, he made a cowardly getaway and he took his troops with him. Unfortunately, he left 360 citizens to fend for themselves. They were slaughtered by Rupert's troops, and unfortunately the royalists that garrisoned the castle from then on, but they only garrisoned it for 3 months because the castle changed hands 3 times. And with that cowardly getaway, the Moors were never forgiven. The siege of the castle by Rupert lasted 18 days, but he also lost 2,000 men and used up all his gunpowder. And from here, Liverpool Castle, he went up to Marston Moor for another famous battle. But there is another castle, Rupert Castle, and the blue half of the city, the football fans, would know this very well. So I want you to come with me to Everton. We've just been talking about the real Liverpool Castle. Here in Everton is Prince Rupert's Castle, but it's a myth. It was built in 1787 and it was just used for a lock-up. And as you can see for yourself, it's a little turret, not a castle. When I say a lock-up, it wasn't for possessions like gold or silver or anything like that. It was a lock-up for the bad people of the time, drunks, people who stole, and especially it was used as a holding cell for condemned men, or women for that matter, who went up to the gibbet in London Road, and that's where they swung. This structure is over 200 years old, and as you can see, it's still finely maintained. After all, it's a part of the city's heritage. And for the Evertonians, it's used as their emblem on their football strip. I don't think anybody's in here at the moment, but I tell you what, I could think of a few people today who could put in there. Could you? Look at the fantastic view. No wonder Prince Rupert used this to look down at the castle. We've taken the short journey from the man in the pyramid to the man in the tunnels, the mole of Edgehill. After the Napoleonic Wars of 1815, there were many British soldiers unemployed. Also, there were French prisoners of war who were incarcerated in Liverpool and needed to get back home, but unfortunately, they had no money. One man came to their rescue. This man, Joseph Williamson, the mole of Edgehill. You've all heard of a money pit. This is the ultimate money pit. The French and British soldiers who were once bitter enemies were now working side by side. What was the purpose of these tunnels? Was it for canals? Was it for the railway system? Were they for drainage? No, they were plain follies. After 200 years, the pick marks are still visible today after all the hard work by the soldiers just to get back to France. Joseph loved his wife that much that he had a tunnel specially dug from his house in Mason Street up to the church in St Mary's, so that if it rained, she wouldn't get wet. And it became the most expensive umbrella in the world. Joseph Williamson spent the equivalent of £26 million of his own money so that soldiers could go back home to France and so that he could live underground just like the mole. We've just been in an enclosed space, but you don't realise the vastness of the tunnels. Just have a look at this. His tunnels did set the precedent for the forthcoming railway system when the engineers used his idea of tunnels to get from A to B. The tunnels are still being excavated even today, and some of the finds have been extraordinary. The likes of crockery like this, wonderful old bottles like this. But one of the finds is this. Just take a look at it. And it's an old kiddie's car. It could even be yours. And looking at it, I think it's run out of its MOT. The myth surrounding Joseph Williamson digging all the tunnels around Liverpool is a myth, because Joseph Williamson dug the tunnels here in Edgehill where he lived, and only here. There's two ordinary Liverpool pigeons going about their daily business. There are two other birds that overlook our city, and believe you me, they're not ordinary. The liver birds derived from 1207, when the antiquary of King John came up to the area, overlooked the harbour, as we know today, Liverpool. He went back to King John and said, claim it for the realm, this piece of land, because nobody owned it. So King John said, what's there? And he said, well, local people who are fishing call it the pool. He said, well, is there anything else there? And he said, well, yeah, there's on the shore, there's tons and tons of laver, which is an old Anglo-Saxon word meaning seaweed. So King John put pool and laver together and derived the name Liverpool for the Royal Charter on the 28th of August, 1207. And that is how Liverpool derived its name. So what kind of bird is the liver bird? It's no ordinary bird. It's not a pigeon or a seagull, nor is it a cormorant, as people imagine. In fact, it's the royal seal of King John, the eagle of St. John and King John. So why does it look so weird? During the English Civil War in 1644, when Prince Rupert came here, laid siege to the castle. 3 months later, the parliamentarians retook the castle. One of the lads went up to the town hall, got hold of the royal seal and smashed it up. By the time King Charles II was enthroned, they asked an engraver to come out with the royal seal, the original royal seal of Liverpool, the eagle of King John and St. John. Unfortunately, it came out not quite right, and people thought that it was a cormorant. And what's that in its beak? Well, of course, it's the laver, it's the seaweed, Liverpool's name symbolised. This is St. John's Gardens, but why isn't it called St. George's Gardens? After all, this is St. George's Hall. The answer is simple. What stood here since 1771 was St. John's Church. And don't forget, St. George's Hall wasn't built until 1854. Take a look at this. This is an actual picture of St. John's Church being demolished in 1898. Sadly, there are not many pictures left of it. There's a great urban myth surrounding the hall, and the myth is that the hall was built back to front. But how can the hall be built back to front when St. John's Church is already established in place? And also, what do you associate with the church? A cemetery. It's as simple as that. So why would the architect, Harvey Lonsdale Elms, have a steps plateau coming into a cemetery? The hall was not built back to front because Lime Street Station, that was there in 1836, and only the rich people could afford to get on the trains, came out to Lime Street Station and seen this wonderful building with its steps and plateau. The myth, unfortunately, continues with the death of its architect, Harvey Lonsdale Elms. He was supposed to have committed suicide when he returned 12 years later and seeing the hall built back to front. It's a load of nonsense, and it's been fabricated over the years. Unfortunately, he did die 7 years before the completion of the hall in Jamaica, where he was sent by his physicians to recover from a common disease, tuberculosis. There are other myths within this vicinity. So let's go over and have a look at Nelson. Nelson. We're on the steps of the Whale Museum, William Brown Street. And did I say a moment or two ago that this was Nelson? In fact, it's an easy mistake to make. Actually, it's the Duke of Wellington. And people often ask why he doesn't overlook the city. Well, he's actually facing Waterloo as the crow flies, his most famous victory in 1815. You'll like this. He's not made from bronze or marble or stone. He's made from the French cannons captured at Waterloo. No, it's not there neither. It's very hard to find these things. Well, it's not here. Let's see. Ah, yeah, there it is here. Because when you go in there, down there, there's a spiral staircase that leads right to the top. You open up the doors and you clean the monument itself and the Duke. Where shall we go next? From a huge monument to a much smaller one in Rodney Street, and there's some story behind that one. This is Rodney Street, the home of William McKenzie. Did he live in one of these fantastic Georgian buildings? No. The myth is, he's in a pyramid. This is John Foster's St Andrew's Church, which unfortunately has seen better days. The myth surrounds William McKenzie, a Scottish railway contractor who was an avid gambler. His ambition was to have a royal flush, the highest hand you can have in poker. McKenzie said if he never fulfilled his ambition in life, he surely wanted to fulfill it in death. His will stipulated his instructions very, very well, right down to the finest detail, that he should be sitting at a chair with a bottle of scotch, holding a royal flush in his hand. So if he never fulfills it in life, he surely would fulfill it in death. So is it just a myth that McKenzie is in the pyramid, or is it fact? I'd like to think that he is sitting in the pyramid with his glass of scotch, holding his royal flush. I'd really like to think so. Just seen some of these wonderful Spanish names. I wonder if some of them play for Liverpool. This is a myth here, because people really thought that this was a Spanish embassy. In fact, it was built in 1860 by Sir James Picton as a gentleman's club. Today, it's the Racket Club. This was Liverpool's first public chapel. I'm not talking about Walton, I'm not talking about Toxteth, I'm not talking about Everton, Kirkdale, West Derby, Liverpool. When the castle was completed in 1235, there was a chapel inside the castle itself called St Mary del Keys. And when the lads went up one Sunday to go to Mass, because it was very religious in those days, They knocked on the door. They weren't allowed to go in. The sheriff said, "You're not coming in here. Go away. Build your own chapel somewhere else and don't build it on the castle grounds." So they went down to the water's edge where they built a small chapel called St. Mary del Quays, but it's spelt with the Q, Quays as in water, because the quays in the castle was called St. Mary del Quays with the lock. So there were two different St. Mary del Quays. And today it's simply known as St. Nick's, the Sailors' Church. When Liverpool got its Royal Charter in 1207, they had to base the 7 original streets on an old Roman street plan. This was one of the 7 original streets. It was Moor Street. However, it's not Moor Street anymore. It's Tithebarn Street. Why did it change its name from Moor Street to Tithebarn Street? Simple. People in those days paid their tithes, which were taxes, in a big barn which was on Moor Street. And that's where they got the name from, Tithebarn Street. This hasn't always been known as Old Hall Street. It was named Whiteacre Street simply because of the white acreage of the crops. One of the major families, the Moors, built a big manor house here in Whiteacre Street, but unfortunately they left and it went to rack and ruin. So they renamed it Old Hall Street. Chapel Street is one of the 3 that still retains its name, and you can see why. Because of St. Nick's, it's a stunning chapel. This is another of the original streets, Water Street, but it hasn't always been known as Water Street. It was known as Bank Street, simply because of the banks of the river. Castle Street still retains its name because it was the first of the 7 original streets. At the bottom of it was the castle. High Street was known as Juggler Street, simply because the jugglers, the acrobats, the minstrels congregated here, went down Castle Street to entertain the nobles at the castle. We're in Dale Street, and I'm sorry you can't read the sign. I should have brought my ladder and paintbrush, and maybe then you could have read it. But this has always retained its name because it was known as the Dale Street, because this was a dale. The 7 original streets were made wide, and the advantage of having wide streets was that during 1349 to 59 there was a great plague, and the prevailing winds coming off the Irish Sea blew away the pestilence. And that's why Liverpool's little population of over 1,000 people then survived, because of the width of the streets. During that time, Liverpool was the healthiest place to live. This is Hope Street, the only street in the world where you have one cathedral at one end and a cathedral at the other end. And on this street in 1826, there was something very sinister that was discovered. John Henderson was a Scottish merchant, but was he? Because when he came to Liverpool, he said that he was a fish oil exporter, and he hired a cellar based right here in Hope Street. Mr. Henderson was not involved in the fish business. He was involved in a very, very lucrative body snatching business. The bodies Henderson acquired through his grave robbing were actually pickled in his cellar of where he lived, ready to be transported up to the anatomical institutions in Edinburgh. However, he was discovered, but unfortunately, he never ever got caught, because when he seen the police outside his home, he took to his heels. The bodies that were discovered had to be reburied, but no one knew their identity, so they were buried in a pauper's grave. Remember when I mentioned the orchard, which was at the back of the town hall, where all the business of Liverpool was conducted? Obviously it's there no longer. However, on the 21st of August 1775, the sailors unrigged all the ships in Liverpool because they went on strike. Why they went on strike? The merchants decided they wanted to make more money, because the sailors were on 30 shillings a week, so they decided to take 10 shillings off them. And don't forget, people were living hand to mouth in those days, and that includes the sailors' families. Some sailors were actually incarcerated because they went on strike, and they were incarcerated down at the Tower, which is at the bottom of Water Street, and other sailors went there to freedom. So on the 1st of September 1775, they congregated outside the town hall, 2,000 of them. In Castle Street, there were gunsmiths, and the sailors went into the gunsmiths and brought out pistols, cutlasses, muskets, and they also brought 2 cannons from a ship placed here to set siege to the town hall. Behind these gates were 300 special constables along with the Mayor Wright. And he said to them, "All right, lads, get out there and sort them. This is 2,000 sailors." And they said, "Are you joking? You get out there and sort them, because there's 2,000 of them out there and they've got cannons, guns and muskets." Really, there was no contest, because there was 2,000 mad sailors waiting to confront the special constables. And they wouldn't go out. I wouldn't, would you? The conflict was finally resolved, and the ringleader, General Gage, he wasn't executed or anything like that. He was actually coerced into the Royal Navy, because the Royal Navy were actually at war with the French and they needed tough men, and General Gage was the toughest of the lot. Don't forget, on the 1st of September during the siege, there was musket fire, there was cannon fire, there was every kind of fire. But where's the damage? Can you see any? I can't. Why you can't see the damage today is because they brought in the famous architect John Foster Sr. to redesign the whole of the front, the badly damaged front, and he designed the famous balcony. This is St James's Cemetery in the grounds of the Anglican Cathedral, and the cemetery is linked to a great piece of history and also to a great myth. The myth is linked to this grave and who's buried here. Unfortunately, through time, the grave has toppled over, but we have got footage of actually who is buried here. The name on the tombstone is Oliver Cromwell, but not the Oliver Cromwell. This was a child, and infant mortality at the time of the 19th century was very high, and this child is buried here. Oliver Cromwell and Oliver Cromwell, and you can see how myths develop. From fiction to fact, this is John Foster Jr.'s mausoleum dedicated to William Huskisson, the very first fatality of the railway system. Baroness Ortsky used William Huskisson for her novel The Scarlet Pimpernel, because it was actually he, William Huskisson, who went over to France and rescued the French aristocrats during the French Revolution. How did this legendary man die? In fact, he went over to greet the then Prime Minister, the Duke of Wellington, who was on board Stephenson's rocket. He tripped up and the rocket went over him and he was killed. And this is where he's buried. Huskisson's name lives on, not only here in St James's Cemetery, but also in Huskisson Street, which is a stone's throw from here, and also Huskisson Dock. I hope you've enjoyed Liverpool Unravelled, so join me again on Liverpool Unseen. He died 7 years before its completion with a rare and common. A rare and common.
Rare and common.
Hello. Okay, tell me. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure, yeah, I would just say...
Do you like me hair's the wig all right? Might blow off.
Right, you're rolling.
You've just seen some of these. Liverpool. Because when the... Right. The bodies that he couldn't get up.
All right, friend. Yeah, come on, friend.
That's terrible, isn't it? But also in Huskisson Street, which is a stone's throw from here, and also Huskisson Dock.
I'd like to present you with this BAFTA, Frank. This invisible BAFTA for all your hard work on the Liverpool Unravelled series. Thanks very much.
Thank you. And you know, I'd like to give a speech now.
Sorry, there's no time.
Thank you for joining me on Liverpool Unravelled. I hope you've really enjoyed it. So, and